Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's Q&A. Sorry it's a little bit late, but I forgot it was Friday. I know that sounds like a really stupid thing to say, but I've just been digging in deep in a couple of videos I have coming up, and I just totally even forgot what day it was. I even woke up at like 7 this morning and asked my wife why she was getting up on her day off, and she's like, it's not my day off. So yeah, I'm all in the clouds today, but hopefully I'll do a somewhat decent job at the Q&As, so let's jump right in. First up, over on Subscribestar, the importer asked, do I think that Terra Onion will donate the FPGA secrets to the Mister community in order to get Sega CD and PC Engine cores? It's not like people using a Mister can use the products anyway, so it's not really taking away sales. I can't speak for anybody else, but I could only speculate what I would do if I were in their position. And I think a lot of people seem to forget how much time and effort and money, as a result, of course, come into developing some of these things. So if it were me personally, I would follow the half open source thing that many other people are doing, in that I would make sure to sell the product that I designed and spent years of my life on. I'd probably sell that for like a year, and then open source the code or donate it to Mister in a way where maybe it can't be reverse engineered and people can steal it. Because I think the problem is it's not that Terra Onion wouldn't want to donate these cores in order to make Mister a better platform. It's that anything that has to go on Mister has to be open sourced for all the right reasons, of course. So I know for me personally, after spending years of my life on something that I'm trying to make a living off of, I would be devastated if I gave that away to a community like Mister out of good faith and had some random person that's not even associated with the community make a clone of the thing that I worked very hard on. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't expect it, and I certainly wouldn't be mad about that. I do hope there's some plan in place at some point for everybody to get together and share this stuff. But I completely understand if it's not right away. And I'm even part of a few projects that have always been intended to be open source. But we're going to do a small, when I say we, I mean, I'm just tagging along, high-fiving, but we're going to do a small run of these things first and then open source it. So that way, if it does get cloned or stolen, the devs who spent so much time on these things could at least get a little bit of cash back. And hopefully people will respect the project and, add to it, and the devs can continue to sell it and make money. I can continue to make videos out of it and hopefully scoop up more supporters so to pay for my time. So it's kind of like the vicious circle. So while I would love to stand here and demand that these things be open sourced, I completely understand if they never go open source. I just hope the community finds like a happy medium for how to handle stuff like this. Next, Seraphil asked if I had any retro RGB stickers. I would love one for my PVM. I never really even thought about doing that, but that's an awesome idea. So I just spent like an hour whipping one up. I'll put the link in all the descriptions here. But I'm not an artist, so what I have is kind of neat, but if any of you artists out there wouldn't mind donating another design or something like that, I think that would be really awesome. I love things like that. I'm not creative enough. I'm shocked I could even write songs, let alone, play music, because I have no other artistic qualities about me. I can't just see something and create it. So any artists out there, I am open to any and all ideas. And I did have one kind of fun, neat little sticker I just listed now. But yeah, I'm all ears. Hopefully the one I listed doesn't suck too bad. Diego had a question. He said, it's been a while since the last time I heard of a cool project I showed once. That was a PCB which would convert any D-input USB controller into console outputs. So in other words, a cheap but good controller, like an arcade stick or steering wheel for PC, could be played laglessly on the Sega Saturn or Neo Geo. I barely remember that. Now, there's, of course, the Bliss box, which is the opposite. That's all console adapters for controllers that you could use on the PC, on the Mister, or on other devices. But I vaguely remember what you're talking about it, and I haven't heard anything since. So that would be pretty cool, but I don't think it would be lagless. I think the minimum... the minimum it could possibly be is like 4 milliseconds, which you might as well just call lagless. but the average converter design I've seen for things like that is usually a bit more. The only thing that I do use all the time is my undammed adapter. So that's USB in, and the output of that is Neo Geo style. But I think what you're talking about is more like a reverse bliss box. So no, I haven't heard anything more about it. I try to stay on top of all the projects I talk about, but some just fade away over time. So sorry about that. Phil Welker says, in the center of the N64 RGB Advanced board, there's a giant chip, and underneath that chip, there's a spot of copper. What is it? What does it do? And how does it affect the way I solder it? So the only thing that I could tell you is it doesn't affect the way you solder it. You just solder the chip around it. I have no idea what that's for. It could be an exposed ground plane to purposely reduce interference. To be honest, I got nothing. Anything else that I would say is just speculation and probably out of my wheelhouse. So just don't worry about it. Solder the chip over it. And that's a really complicated board to put together. So unless you're experienced with this stuff, I would consider checking into other people doing group buys of it. And, my apologies if you are experienced doing this stuff. I know from my past history, I would look at something like this and go, yeah, I think I could handle it. And I'd get the whole thing done and then screw up this big chip, which is the most expensive part too. So, I don't know. If more power to you if you could do stuff like this, but this one is a bit of a complicated install. Dan Mons wanted to chime in about downloading different Dreamcast GDI rips in my paranoia that I'm getting a bad copy. He wanted to remind everybody, with respect to trusted dumps, there are expert archival groups like No Intro, Redump, and Tosec who can be trusted. They use carefully developed tools and methods to rip games, and use high-quality checksums to verify them across multiple dumps from multiple contributors. These teams have been working for many years, often decades, to verify checksums, to verify that checksums can deliver lists and tools that you could use to check your own rips for however you've acquired a game. Most of these checksums are used by tools like MAME and Smoke Monster's ROM packs. Independent experts like BU often verify these frequently too, which is a good thing because multiple independent tests always just improve confidence in the data. So if anybody's motivated to help with these dumps, hit up the Redump wiki and see how you can contribute checksums to help the cause. So excellent point. Dan's 100% correct. I think for me is a bigger fear of all of this stuff is what happens as these things get passed around. So you're 100% right. I should just look up checksums to make sure that everything is the way it is. But I've certainly seen rips from one of these trusted dumps come from like a full ROM set. So let's just say all of the letter A from US Dreamcast. I've certainly seen those pulled out, compressed, and sent around and get messed up. So you're right. You can feel free to trust a lot of these as long as you verify the checksums. So thanks for the reminder and for calming a bit of my paranoia. I don't know if you'll ever stop me from ripping my own disc for my absolute favorite games, but I don't know. That's probably for me personally a combination of weird nostalgia. It's all ones and zeros. It doesn't make it my game, but whatever. And also just knowing that if I'm going to really dump hours into playing a game, I want to really make sure it's perfect. To be honest, at that point, I would probably trust Beast or Firebrand X over me for these things anyway. And of course, Smoke Monster and all that. But yeah, you're totally right. Next time I'm looking to freak out about one of these things, I'll just do the checksum test and make sure. I mean, all of my stuff I get from those anyway. So that's perfect. Thanks, Dan. John Geff had an interesting one. He said that he just got an OSSC and promptly did the lag tester modification, which is an awesome mod that lets you use the OSSC as a lag tester, which I kind of forgot about ever since the Time Sleuth came out. But to continue on, he then proceeded to test a few of the TVs they have in their office, which are Samsung, Sharp, and Dynex. The Samsung started at 100 milliseconds before switching to game mode, which dropped it to 40 milliseconds, which is about on par with what I've seen. The Sharp one also came in at 40 milliseconds. However, the Dynex one, which apparently is a Best Buy brand, came in at less than 2 milliseconds. That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat to find that info out, that you could find it that low. It seems to follow the pattern of the TCL TVs where expensive does not equal low latency. Yep, totally. Cost doesn't seem to make a difference. Of course, the better the panel, the better the quality. Some of the ones I showed in that video, you could still see some motion blur on movement, but at least it's low lag. So at that point, it's a perfectly good experience that's not as good as it could be. But yeah, agreed. Price doesn't seem to matter about these. He said prior to getting the OSSC, he thought he'd try a little experiment that someone might be able to expand on. He wired a photodiode across the A button, or across button X, sorry, to on a PlayStation controller connected to a PS1 running the 240p test suite, and tried the manual lag test. While he could get the button to fire, it was only when it was held to a bright light. So I guess that means he was holding up to it so that every time the manual lag test crossed the center plane and went all white, it would trigger it. That's pretty neat. That might be able to work. Artemio, if I remember correctly, mentioned doing something like that. And these are all really awesome projects that if I had more time, I would love to spend on these things, especially if we find a more accurate way of testing lag. But to be perfectly honest, ever since I got the Time Sleuth, I haven't checked anything else, just because I've checked the Time Sleuth a million times ever since I got it, and the only time it wasn't flawlessly accurate was in the case of the ZSWorks kit, but that wasn't really a problem with the Time Sleuth. That was kind of a problem with the way the backlit kit works for that, because don't forget, the Time Sleuth can read less than 0 on a CRT, so it's certainly not an issue with this. So yeah, if anybody has any other thoughts on different lag tests like that, I'm all ears, but for now I'm just sticking with my Time Sleuth. Juan Rodriguez said he picked up a Dreamcast that wasn't reading discs and was going to open it up to try and adjust the laser, but hasn't found any specs as to what the resistance should be. So if anybody has any more info on exactly what you should adjust the laser to be, please post and let us all know. To be perfectly honest, I haven't even started testing lasers with the oscilloscope, because once I go down that road, I'm gonna take apart all my consoles and adjust all the lasers, and then I'm gonna grab all my friends' consoles and do all theirs. Because whenever I go into a deep dive like this, I like to archive it. I like to do videos on it. Anybody that's followed the video capture section in the past year knows how obsessive I can get with this. I think it's a good thing because it ends up in guides and stuff for everybody else. But I've been afraid to start that because it's uncharted territory, and I know I'm gonna just drop 100 hours on this immediately just to start getting into it. So my apologies that I've been slacking on that, but I'm hoping to finish up a lot of the videos I've had queued up by the end of this year, and then just tackle one project at a time after that, which is always the dream, but then that'll never happen. But at least I'm going to try to hope to get closer to that, so that I could just say something like, okay, February is going to be testing laser month or something. But sorry, I really don't have anything to add to that, but hopefully somebody else does. And lastly, Chris from Belgium had some questions about the new analog DAC. I think it's best if I just kind of explain what I know rather than answer your questions directly. It might just come across a little clearer. But as far as I know, and these are generalizations, so if you're an FPGA engineer, please don't reach through YouTube and slap me in the face for glossing over details. But as far as I know, this is a device that once it's plugged into any console branded analog, that's obviously on a newer firmware that knows what it is. Once it's plugged in, it sends a signal to the console on boot that says the DAC's plugged in. And then that would change the way that original console sends the signal down the HDMI port. Then that is what kind of takes the signal and arranges it to 240p and turns it into analog and spits it out the different connectors. So, do your questions of can it be used with a PC or other devices? I'm gonna say almost guaranteed no. And if it did, it would have to be something custom. One of the things I asked Kevin when he first mentioned a DAC was being released was, would you consider open sourcing the input? Not the whole device, but that way anybody out there with HDMI only consoles or custom stuff might be able to change the signal so that it works with this. So that would be their essentially easy RGB out. And his answer to that was, I got to finish the DAC first, then I'll worry about that stuff, which is totally fair, 100% fair. And then you asked what resolutions does it support on the input. Might not be resolutions at all. It might be video generated in a different way going down the HDMI port. Because remember that the inputs of this doesn't need to be HDMI compliant, only the outputs do. I actually don't think any analog products are compliant for real. Just saying. And you asked, is it a digital analog converter and a downscaler? My guess is no. My guess is it's not sending it. Like, one could think that it would send this a 480p signal and then downscale it to 240p just by having all the lines in there. I don't think this is how it works. And I also don't think this is how it works because if it was, I would really want to be able to use this on other devices, because that would mean that you could take something like a PlayStation 4 and a shoot 'em up, set it to 480p, and then play it on an RGB monitor. Which, it's funny, sometimes when I say stuff like that, people say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you play a new game on older monitors? And other people hear that and go, holy crap, that sounds awesome. So to each his own. But no, I don't think it's a downscaler. I should just ask him about that. The next time I talk to him, I will. And my overall opinion on the DAC is it's perfect in the right scenario. So if you already own a one-chip SNES, there's no reason, and the Super NT, let's say, there's no reason to get this. Your original console is going to be great. If you don't own a Super Nintendo at all, then you really want to consider which would you prefer, just getting this adapter or getting a Super Nintendo and an RGB cable, which is pretty much the same cost as this. Because these are pretty expensive when you factor in shipping and the fact that you need to buy a cable with it. It doesn't come with any output cables. But on the other hand, if you don't have any original consoles at all, but you have the Mega SG and the Super NT and whatever consoles that Analog are probably coming out with at some point, and you want a good RGB output, this would make perfect sense, because now you could have both outputs. You already own the consoles, and it would actually kind of be cost effective if you think about it. And then you don't have to worry about mods, of course, because for a Genesis to get this high quality audio and video, you would need to triple bypass it. So anybody that's good at modding or knows a modder, that's not a big deal, but there's a lot of us that don't. So my overall thoughts on that, I was kind of harsh in my write-up because their whole shipping thing, it just feels sleazy to me. I don't understand why some people pay $80 shipping when you could very easily cut a deal with shipping companies for cheap worldwide distribution. It was something I worked on at a past company. So my view on this is, if I could do it, anybody could do it, and they've had years to do it. So I was kind of overly harsh because of the price, but the truth is there's absolutely scenarios in which this is the perfect solution. And I'll talk more about that on the podcast next week and everything, but hopefully that clarified everything. Well, that's it for this week. Before I go, I just want to say another very heartfelt thank you to everybody that I met at a video game con in Jersey last weekend. It really was a great time. I met a lot of people that sometimes I only get a chance to see at the expos. And also, I wanted to give a huge thank you to the people that sat in on the presentation. The time got changed to a half hour earlier. And as I learned from all the years of booking gigs with the band, anytime you change a time, most people aren't going to realize or pay attention, because I already said 6:45 so many times. So when it got bumped to 6:15, I kind of felt like I was going to be talking to an empty room. And if friends didn't show up, I would have. Turns out most of the crowd that came showed up at the original time of 6:45, maybe a little earlier. So, it happens. It's not a big deal. I'm glad I still got to do it. But there were some people in there that sat through that presentation for a second time because they'd already seen it in Long Island. And I think they just wanted to come and be part of the Q&As and help me fill those seats so I wouldn't be talking to an empty room. So that was an amazing gesture. I don't ever forget things like that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope to meet more of you at Retro World Expo. I'll be in the main room, I believe, on Sunday at 4 p.m. And I'm very excited about that because that's where my first ever gaming-related panel started, Retro World 4 or 5 years ago or something. So I'll be giving this, it'll be one of the last times I give this presentation. It'll be a tiny bit different this time. So if you just saw it at the last ones, it's cool if you don't make it. But if you haven't seen it yet, I really like this one. And I think it's a good demonstration of of why we all do the things that we do. So thank you so much to everybody that showed up. Thanks to everybody that participates in these. And any questions at all that you have, just ask them in the newest Q&A wherever it is that you support. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.